Hey, well, I'm very, very happy to introduce Fabien this morning. We're excited to have you here as our guest and as our speaker today. This is Fabien Esculier. He is a high-level civil servant of the French Ministry of Ecology. He's worked for 6 years for various public institutions in the water sector. In 2014, he set up the OCAPI Action Research Program, which aims to study and support the socio-ecological transition of food excretion systems, and in particular to investigate the potential for a paradigm shift in the management of human urine and feces through source separation and agricultural valorization. He's now the coordinator of a multidisciplinary action research team, which involves biogeochemistry, agronomy, sociology, anthropology, geopolitics, and territorial ecology. The OCAPI program has become a publicly funded national resource center for source separation. So you're doing wonderful work in France with some fabulous collaborators. We're so excited to hear what you have to share with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everybody here. Hello, everybody online. Bonjour. It's an honor for me to be here. I have to say I've heard about the Richard Institute, I believe, for about 8 years. And it's been on my list. That's the place where I need to go one day. And so I was very honored to be invited to introduce this conference. And I thought, okay, this is the occasion for me to come. So I'm very excited. I just arrived yesterday. I had time to meet a few folks, but haven't seen so many things yet. And I'm really enthusiastic about discussing for the Virtual Summit with everybody and trying to empower each other with what is happening today in France and Europe and what is happening here in the United States. So I prepared a speech about the question of strategies for a paradigm shift in human and fecal matter management. Maybe we should move the little bar.
Yeah. The mouse is a little tricky to find here. Ryan, do you think you could help us? I can't find the mouse.
I don't know.
Maybe if we escape and reshare.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You have it? Oh, great. All right. I don't know which is the font of the.
And then maybe just make this a little smaller. Make that one, the second one. Great.
Sorry.
Okay, it's all right.
That's good. Let's move this to the side.
Oh.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us.
All right. So as Abe mentioned, I am a coordinator of the OCAPI program in France. It's a action research program hosted in Ecole des Ponts institution, depending on the Ministry of Ecology, and I work in the lab called LEESU and working on the question of water in general in the city. So what I would like to share this morning is first a few lessons learned from history on our topic, what the new regime of the Anthropocene changes to the question today, talk about the current French dynamics and share them with you, and then trying to summarize all this in terms of what are the strategies that we can implement for a socio-ecological transition. In terms of history, we did a lot of research in history in the OCAPI program, and there was a true era of circularity, especially in the 19th century. Eastern Asia was the place, I think, that is the most known about using human excreta. I'm quoting an imperial decree, Chinese imperial decree, saying human excreta is the strength and the health of the people. And the characters that you see here, Ginger Hong, it means the business of the golden juice. I don't know if you use this term in the Rich Earth Institute, but you can find inspiration from centuries-old practices in China. It was not only in China or in Japan, as the picture here shows, it was also in France, with a lot of different devices that were used to spread urine and or fecal matter on the agricultural soils and there were true businesses working from collection, storage, collection, transformation, transportation to miles distance before valorization. My colleague Emmanuel Adler, in his thesis, he listed 200 patents only in France in the 19th century concerning human excreta management. So, I mean, producing food is strategical, and human excreta being a fertilizer in the 19th century during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, being able to valorize these human excreta and fertilize the soil was of paramount importance. And a lot of work was going on this topic. America was not at all on the side. And here you can see two advertisements from the 19th century about poudrette. So poudrette is the name of a French patent for transforming fecal matter and urine into a dry product. And it was sold in the US under the term poudrette, and many different cities in the United States had their poudrette factories, like most French cities also. So here you can see the farmers advertising for Excelsior poudrette and another poudrette that were at that time sold. What happened afterwards here, you can see, I don't know, there's something else that appeared. Sorry. Do you think we could take it away?
If I find the lines.
Sorry.
Oh, good.
You got it. Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Yes.
If we look at what happened in, we studied the case of Paris, and we, since we do a biogeochemistry, we follow the way that the systems work mostly with nitrogen, which is a good way to trace the management of food excreta systems. What you can see in the case of Paris, that is well documented since the 19th century, we have been able to calculate the nitrogen recycling rate from the human excretions of the people in Paris. So what we see is that in the middle of the 19th century, the paradigm was that there were sewers that were built, but they were to collect the rain out of the city, and excreta was valorized as a fertilizer. But these systems did not work very well, and we only had about a 10% recycling rate in the middle of the 19th century because of leachates of the urine, especially in the septic tanks that were at the bottom of the buildings. But this rose because people were paying attention to recycle as best as possible our excreta, and it rose gradually every decade. And then Paris had a very peculiar choice, because water was brought to the buildings, so people had the opportunity to use a flush toilet. But the flush toilet was forbidden because the sewer went to the river, so then you would lose the human excreta richness, and you would also pollute the rivers. So the main way to combine the comfort of using a flush toilet for the people and valorization of the human excreta was to do sewage farm. So that was implemented at the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century. So the sewage was directly brought to the farmland, and this enabled to have a rise in the recycling rate until 50% nitrogen recycling rate from the provision nitrogen excreta at the beginning of the 20th century. So half of the people had flush toilets connected to the sewer going directly on the farm, and half of the other people had septic tanks, but at that time the techniques were much better and the recycling rate was very high. And some of the fertilizers were even exported to Northern America at that time. Afterwards, the city grew up, and we went into the second phase of the Industrial Revolution, where human excreta as a fertilizer was less and less regarded, and river discharge became the main issue with the main valorization. The main route for human excreta. So we had huge pollution of the river Seine, so much pollution that people ended up by saying, okay, we need to treat this wastewater. But at that time, we built wastewater treatment plants that were not able to recycle because of the dilution of all these matter. And so today in Paris, we are at 5% nitrogen recycling rate in the whole city. The quality of the river Seine is much better because nitrogen is destroyed in the wastewater treatment plant, but we don't valorize it. And so we are right now having the lowest ever recycling rate in Paris and in the Western world in general for the last 200 years. This, of course, was made possible because of a paradigm shift in agriculture, and especially the Haber-Bosch process, the process of to synthesize nitrogen fertilizers at the beginning of the 20th century, made it so that people were not interested anymore by organic fertilizers, because chemistry was providing with fossil resources fertilization for agriculture. This also went with changes in the way that people think about sanitary engineering. And our PhD student, Paul Minier, defended his thesis 2 weeks ago on the question of sanitation and health aspects. So I'm glad to share a few things that he worked on, and especially he looked at the American sanitation manuals, the Metcalfe and Eddy, that has been published for more than 100 years in the United States, the same edition of how should we manage wastewater. So there's a shift from at the beginning a matter of agricultural valorization and sanitary safety. People were studying what are the diseases, especially from fecal matter, how do they transmit from a person to another one. But then at the beginning of the 19th century, the main idea was, okay, what we need if we want to keep good health for people is mostly purify the water. And what they wrote in the 1914 edition is, it is in our opinion that in general, protection of public water supplies is more economically secured by water purification at the intake than by sewage purification at the sewer outlet. So it's kind of a sacrifice of the river that was more or less decided, because it's more economical to just pollute, and then we have enough technology to treat the polluted water to make it purified water. And it became even worse in the next decades. Finally, it's a sole matter of comfort that decides how we are going to design our sanitation systems. I quote the 1934 edition of Metcalfe and Eddy: consideration of the public health had some influence in the earlier periods, but in later times, public comfort has come to be the more pointed incentive. This is also the case in the French sanitation manuals, and it's the worldwide way that this sewer management of human excreta became a sole matter of comfort, and the fertilizing value was forgotten, and the sanitary aspects were not at all attained thanks to the sewer, but mostly to the water purification. This has brought, however, magical thoughts about the management of human excreta with the sewer, and today a strong barrier to alternative management of human excreta is the fact that the sewer is supposed to have saved us from typhoid, from cholera. And for example, a poll in 2007 by the British Medical Journal says that the biggest improvement of health in the last century was sewer as the best medicine. And Paul Minier, in his thesis, showed that, of course, the sewer has an effect on the question of health, for example, with water that can stay on the streets and that doesn't stay anymore. But at the same time, there are also some magical thoughts. So here, it doesn't work, I'm sorry. For the people online, I don't know how to do it, but here I will show. You can see here the rate of cholera in Paris. That is from the middle of the 19th century until middle of the 20th century. This is the rate of death by cholera, and this is supposed to be the rate of people connecting to the sewer, which is like this here. So in fact, there's a kind of magical thought that the sewer enabled to have less diseases, but I mean, it could have had, but at least in Paris, in the case of cholera, it's not the sewer, the fact that we manage human excreta with the sewer that enabled to have a drop in the cholera problem, but it's mostly a question of water quality, washing hands, good food, and good access to medical care also. So in the end, our big question, if we want to think about how can we shift the paradigm of human excreta management, is the question, why is a technique chosen by a society? And I will refer to an American author, David Noble, and to my colleagues also, Etienne Dufour and Sabine Barr, who worked on these questions. And they say that the success or failure of a technique does not rely on the technique itself and its technical or economical efficiency that are seldom confirmed, but on the cultural values, the leading ideas, and the power relationships in the society. So the main question was never, is the sewer something that is technically or economically efficient? The main question was just, there has been a consensus of people saying, okay, this is the technique we're going to deploy, and then it deploys. So if we want to shift to a circular sustainable management of our human excreta, then it is, of course, a technical question, of course, an economical question, but it's also mostly a question of cultural values and power relationship that we have to think about in order to be strategic in enabling these changes. So if we want to think about this today, of course, one of the big changes is that we are now living at the Anthropocene era and not at what the Holocene era we had before. So what does it mean? It means that, as most of you know, I believe, we consider that we have transgressed already 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. So our planet system is already shifting to another state that changes a lot the conditions of our lives. And we also have a collective commitment to emit much less greenhouse gases. So here you see the greenhouse gases emitted from fossil fuel combustion since 200 years. So you see the past trajectory, and of course, the explosion of these emissions since the 1950s, more or less. And this is the trajectory that we have all signed, I mean, the United States, France, and all the countries in the world in the Paris Agreement, that we are going to follow. Okay, the slope is a bit abrupt. We can all admit this. So, I mean, we can either cry because it's going to be very difficult to attain, or we can also say, okay, our main goal is not necessarily to be sure that we're going to follow this abrupt line, which is going to be difficult to do with socially acceptable measures, but what is the best going down slope that we can aim for? And that's what that's what motivates me every day in my work and what I do. So I think one of the big changes we have now is, as a French person called Aurélien Barraud said in the conference lately, seriousness has changed sides. And I think this is very important. I remember 10 years ago discussing about changing human excreta management, and people were going like, okay, but why do you want to change something that is comfortable? And now, I mean, it's much more easier to answer to people, yeah, okay, do you have a plan that the way we are working now is going to be compatible with respect of this planetary boundaries? And so now it's much more serious to talk about alternative options, which is, I think, an immense opportunity for us to seize. So in the 20th century, we had a lot of hierarchical whistleblowers. I'm thinking, for example, of Rachel Carson in the United States, or the Meadows report, for example. And now we have shifted to a situation where it's written officially in all the documents that we are all committed to changing totally the way that we live, at least on paper. But it's best than at the moment when it was only things that the whistleblower was saying and not taken seriously by the governments. And also the landscape, I mean, the conditions of our life are shifting anyways. I mean, with extreme climate events, with depletion of fossil fuels and so on. So it is now clear to state that there is no other option but to negotiate our Western way of life for the people who are living today in Western country, like here, and find ways to resist to disaster, the situation that we are facing today. So I would like to propose a new framing of the question of our strategies for human excreta management. So a way to frame it could be, okay, sewer management of human excreta is both economically, sanitarily, environmentally, and socially inefficient, but comfortable at the scale of a building for those who benefit from it, and if you don't look at the other externalities. Okay, so that's the point where we are. And the question is, what are the alternative management of human excreta that enable to respect planetary boundaries and social justice? And how do they interact with the global shift in human society organization in the Anthropocene? So, I mean, I would say that this is the main way that we try to think of this question of paradigm shift. And the rest of my presentation, I'll try to give examples of what we are doing now in France. And I hope it will trigger discussion and inspiration for everybody, and in the other side also, about what's the best options for us to work on. So what is the current French dynamics? Okay, we come from far away. In the years 2000, it was not considered a serious topic to talk about human excreta management. It was not in any public policy. It was not in any regulation. It was not in any academic research, or very, very marginally. And there was this very strong socio-technical lock-in and path dependency in favor of sewage that was especially studied in the article by our colleague Aurélie Joveniaux and colleagues. And the way that the French society works had shifted to a nearly total disconnection between agricultural and urban areas. So the agricultural land around the city do not feed the city, and there's nearly no link in either ways between the cities. A little bit with sewage spreading, but very marginal. And most of the sewage travel a very far distance in France. And there's also a big cultural problem. Human excreta management has become an unthought of subject. People don't think about it and don't want to think about it. And it also reveals this strong disconnection between us and the matter we produce, and the fact that we are alive and connected to the cycles of life on the earth, and we are disregarding this. I have a quote I like very much from a person. I was talking about the fact that when you use a flush toilet, you're going to contaminate the river with your urine and fecal matter. And I had a person who answered me, but I don't poo in water. Like, what? Well, I mean, oh, you mean the water in the toilet is the same than the water in the river? Never thought about it. So, I mean, we are totally disconnected. You just open a tap and you can have gallons and gallons of water. You don't need to carry them, so you can consume as much water as you want, and nobody knows where it goes afterwards. So this is a symptom of the total disconnection that we got in our industrial world, and people are even not aware of what happened, and that the water the kind of technical water that you have in the house is the same water as the living water that you have in the environment. So I would say this is the point where we were in the years 2000 and still are, of course, for a high degree today. But at this moment started the structuration of a social movement and professional sector, especially with the Réseau de l'assainissement écologique, the ecological sanitation network, the French ecological sanitation network, which is discussed in an article by Marine Legrand, and she's going to talk about it later, I think today or tomorrow, also on a presentation for the whole story of this emergence of a different cultural approach of human excreta. The story, I mean, I will tell the story from my point of view, then kind of shifted in 2020. In 2020, there was a political decision to make the Paris city bigger in a logic of international competition. Paris is 10 million inhabitants. This is way too small. We need to be bigger and develop and grow and artificialize and everything. So there was a plan of making a Greater Paris project. And I was working at that time at the water police department for the River Seine. So we had the question of, okay, we have the political plan of the Greater Paris project, but then is it going to work? Like, are people going to have water and energy? And are we going to be able to house the people and so on? So I was in the water sanitation working group. And what did this work group say? They said, okay, Paris is on the River Seine. And what people usually don't know is that the River Seine is a very small river. We have dams so that the boats can go on the river. But for example, in 1942, because of World War damages, they had to lower the dams. So instead of having these 5 meters or 6 meters water, we had the Seine like it really is. So the Seine you could cross by foot in the summer if there were no dams. It's kind of an artificial lake. It doesn't flow in the summer. So in fact, we have 10 million inhabitants on a very small river. And we are, with the Greater Paris project, going to have more pollution with wastewater in the river. And this is what the Anthropocene era also brings, is that with climate change, we have analyzed that today the water flow of the River Seine is already 30% lower than 1 century ago, because we already have plus 1.5 Celsius degrees in Paris today. And we're going to have another less minus 30% flow rates in the next decades because of climate change. So we're going to have less dilution of capacity in the Seine. And since the whole sanitation of cities with sewage is based on the idea that the water will dilute, if you have more pollution and less water, then just the paradigm doesn't work anymore. So we have a European water framework directive that enforces the need to have good ecological status of the rivers. In Paris, we are not at the good ecological status today. And this work group said it's just not going to be possible. We already have invested billions of euros in changing all the wastewater treatment plants in the last years, and we are not reaching these good ecological status, and the conditions for the future are just not making it possible. So at that time, we wrote the report and gave it to the government saying, okay, it doesn't work, the Greater Paris, and respecting the planetary boundaries. And like most questions in environmental topics, you just give the report and the government says, okay, it doesn't work. Let's go. Let's go still. I think I reached kind of the limit of my capacity to be civil servant in the Ministry of Ecology at that time. And I was like, no, I mean, if I work for these questions because I want to live in a livable planet with social justice, and I want to contribute to something that, I mean, makes sense. So at that time, I took about 1.5 years to discuss with a lot of people saying, okay, what do you think we can do? And in the end, it's researchers who told me, okay, Fabien, on this topic, nobody knows anything about what we can do. So what you should do is call research. Just, okay, research about it, think about it. And so I built this program called OCAPI in 2014. At the same time, colleagues in Toulouse also built research programs on the question of alternative human excreta management. And it was the beginning of nearly now 10 years story of action research on the topic of alternative human excreta management in Paris. It was triggered by this question, and it was enabled by the two first founders of OCAPI program, which were the Seine-Normandie Water Agency, so it's the financial administration of water sector, and the Paris Wastewater Authority, called the SIAP, that was facing this dead end of the paradigm of sanitation in Paris. In the next years, there was a mutual reinforcement of all actors on the question of source separation. Right now, I kind of find it's kind of a fairy tale I've been living, because I really remember in 2014, I was like, okay, is it really serious to source separate urine and fecal matter? I was really thinking maybe I'm going to like study it for 1 year and then say, it's nonsense and stop. And I mean, I'm here today, so, and people have still supported us for the last 10 years, so I believe it's not so crazy. And in fact, I mean, we just, as I was talking about this David Noble analysis of how the society works, I really feel that, I mean, people have just started thinking all each other, okay, well, this is culturally something that we could share as a value of work, and then it just reinforces, and all the actors reinforce together and bringing some kind of shift. So first, the Wastewater Authority of Paris included source separation in its strategic plan, saying that they needed to study it and favor its deployment. At the end of OCAPI first phase, I defended my PhD thesis on this question. I would say there were 4 main results. The first one, as I mentioned already, is the relevance of source separation. The second one is we studied all the great advances that was made for source separation in European countries in the last decades, I would say starting from the 1990s in Scandinavia, and also in Sweden, Switzerland, Netherlands, Germany, etc., which were much more in advance than France at that time. We also showed the need for pilot projects in France and public support, because all the system is very much heavily public funded. So alternatives need also to be publicly supported. And reframing human excreta management. And I'd be happy to quote Victor Hugo, because in 1862, in the book Les Misérables, he already wrote that a sewer is a misunderstanding. And my thesis is called Nutrition Excretion Systems. So the main idea I defend in my thesis was that human excreta management has nearly nothing to do with water management. And it's a misunderstanding, and that we should analyze the way we want to manage our excreta in coherence with the food systems and agricultural sector. So this is like a major misunderstanding of the last century. And in 2018, the Seine-Normandie Water Agency, which was subsidizing and following the OCAPI program, voted an 80% subsidy for source separation project. It's the chance that we have in France these water agencies that are quite independent and have the ability to fund projects, and they decided to have a high-level subsidy because it was for them the way to be sure to finance this very difficult to emerge projects. And I will then quote two main projects that arose afterwards. In 2020, the city of Paris decided to implement urine source separation in 1,000 people district, the Saint-Vincent-Paul district. So you're going to hear about it again. I think it's today by Mrs. Ginesti and Sajot. And in 2023, so this year, was launched a study for 20,000 people urine collection plan in the Saclay region, which is just south of Paris, a place where, in fact, the greater Paris is happening, so that we are building new buildings and so on, but with the idea of shifting paradigm. So I believe this is one of the biggest today source separation program in Europe, and well, it's at the study point, but it's already huge advances if we look at where we were coming from a few years ago. At the same time, OCAPI program was reinforced. I'm very happy now to work on it with a very nice team where you can see I showed the picture of my colleagues. I'm like the representative of OCAPI program today, especially in terms of greenhouse gas emission to come here. I'm alone, but I hope I will manage to come back for all my colleagues with the nice things I will have seen and shared with you. What we study in OCAPI program is, well, as we mentioned, socio-ecological transition of food excreta system, with trying to have a systemic approach and action-oriented. So we do, I mean, OCAPI program usually is considered quite an original research program because it's very much oriented towards awareness raising, education, and innovation support. Maybe Richard Institute is kind of more operational, but then shifting a lot towards research, and maybe OCAPI program is kind of research oriented, but shifting a lot towards operational. So I believe we are kind of joining together in the middle of this action research strategy. And here you can see the different axis of our research, which is very interdisciplinary. And we have now a lot of different partnerships and mostly public fundings of our research program. Today, as I mentioned, with these two landmark projects, the French is kind of catching up with Northern Europe. That was much more in advance in terms of source separation since the 1990s. And we are witnessing a huge diversity of source separation projects. So we have projects with urine separation, with fecal matter separation, with both separation that are arising in different contexts of dense areas, lower density areas. We have analyzed these dynamics in two articles, and especially in one where we show that separating human excreta is also possibly creating the possibility of shifting other things. And for example, the way that our economy works, and we have documented the way that fecal matter is managed in a building where people are separating their fecal matter, and the way it's managed, it looks a lot like the economy of commons. So we are also thinking of maybe shifting the way we consider our relationship to these matter could also be a way to shift these economical relationships that we have to a way of managing a common value together. But still, of course, it's clear that we are still facing a very strong socio-technical lock-in. I will not go into the details of all the locks, but you can see the number of locks we have to face and that we have analyzed in this article. Maybe the two main locks that we need to look for is first the lack of knowledge. So it is still today a very important issue for all of us to talk about it, get to know about it. So I'm very happy to have that we are having 3 days to talk about it and trying to reach out about these questions, because still too many people don't know about it. So we did a lot of work in the OCAPI program. I think we went more or less in all French media on the topic, but still people don't know enough about it. So there's still a lot to do. And of course, the question of the social norms, hygiene norms and our attitude to bodily waste, but I think are the profound questions behind these this paradigm shift. To summarize and end my presentation, what are the strategy that we can think of for a socio-ecological transition, especially in the human excreta management? I will. So this is the famous graphical picture by LEESU on socio-technical locking, showing that you have a regime that works. Today it's the sewerage regime, and you have technological niche that can appear, plus a landscape, and then landscape change today particularly, and you have technological niche, and like this can bring a shift. So there was a workshop in EAVAG in the beginning of the year, and Christian Binz presented this picture. He said, sorry, it doesn't appear well. Are we here? Like, there's been a lot of niches that started to move, and the question that we were all discussing at this workshop, okay, we are probably somewhere around here. We were quoting, for example, San Francisco, who decided to have a mandatory gray water recycling in big buildings lately, and that is already implementing it. We have the French example of all these new resource management that are happening. So one of the things that was shared, maybe it's going to take place faster than we think, because usually when you're at the beginning of the big slope, it starts to go so fast that you don't realize it. So, I mean, it's both a hope, but also maybe a way to help it happen, to consider the fact that we are hopefully and possibly at the beginning of a big shift in terms of socio-technical lock-in. So I will share the action research strategy that we have in OCAPI. Of course, it's more a research-based strategy that I will share, but there's, of course, many actions to be done in all aspects. So first, I would say our approach is to be radically transdisciplinary and systemic. The question is, how can we embrace the complexity of the whole question? And we are trying always to encompass a work that will be done, for example, a technical work on a question or such a sociological work in the big question, okay, how does this work all together? And I think it's a very important way to make sense for all that we are working on, and be sure to make coherent research and actions in terms of paradigm shift. A second aspect is that we are working a lot on identifying and creating places for exchanging with non-academic actors. So in France, it would mostly be the Pirensen and Asti at the beginning of OCAPI program. Then the ecological sanitation network I mentioned already. We created a work group with an association called ARSO Île-de-France, Association Recherche et Collectivité dans le domaine de l'eau. So it's a water research and municipality association that is hosting a work group on source separation, and that triggers a lot of exchanges between different sectors on the topic. And here the last logo is the Circulus Association. So it's a non-profit association that we have created with different members of OCAPI program at the beginning, and that is now rising a little bit to the civil society and trying to disseminate the question of source separation. We also identified the importance of people that we call the marginal secants. So in French, marginal séquent. It's the people who have been in the different communities and are able to talk from one and the other. So for example, I'm an example. I was in the public administration and I'm a researcher. So I kind of know the codes of the public administration and I know the codes of research. And so in the case of source separation in France, it was something important, like another person called Jean-Pierre Tabuchy was also shifted from different organizations and being able to make bridges between them. So I think this is very important thing we need to do. we need to work with all the people from different in different places in the society, and trying to find the people who are able to make these bridges, to make the information go from one to the other, and it also helps changing the sides for seriousness, I believe. Another important action we make is support and empower the local actors. So here's a short list of people we are working with: the city of Paris, the ParisTech public establishments, L'Auberge, which is a district with source separation in France, the city of Lyon, also very much implied on the question. And we, in OCAPI program, we publish a lot of documents, so you can find them online on our website, leesu.fr/OCAPI. For example, we have documents about how to use urine in agriculture, what are the stakes of source separation, mostly in French. I'm sorry for the non-French speaking community, but we're trying to translate as much as we can many documents. We also have a document about how to collect urine in pipes and how to maintain them, and so on and so forth. Another important aspect of what we are doing is develop prospective approaches. So we're doing a lot of scenarios. Here the figure is showing a scenario that we published with Gilles Bilen in 2021 about shifting human excreta management at the European scale, both in coherence with a shift in the agricultural management. So in this scenario, we're shifting to 100% organic agriculture and generalized human excreta recycling. And we show that, I mean, we are going to have better health. We can feed everybody, and Europe can still export some food outside of Europe. So that's kind of important messages that we work on to show that it is on the paper technically possible. So then the question is not so much a question of being technically possible, but of choosing collectively to go into this direction. And we are at the moment refining all these scenarios and prospective approaches at small scale. I'm thinking particularly of the work by Tanguy Fardet and Thomas Stark. Thomas is going to present some of his work afterwards, where we are modelizing at very small scale what could the new storage, collection, transformation of human excreta look like in our district, and modelize them in order to optimize the way that we can put them in place. We are working also a lot on the weak signals. We do a lot of detailed study of situations that are today quite marginal, but I think it's a very important thing to do to highlight these things, because they are maybe today very small, but they can also be what our future is going to look like. So we do a lot of work on these small situations to be sure that they are well understood, and to help also disseminate them. So, for example, that we did a study on this building, Au Clair du Quartier in Grenoble, where there is source separation of fecal matter and compost in the backyard, and the detailed study enables to give us many lessons on the question of how it could shift to a larger scale. And last but not least, we are working a lot on making new situations emerge, so making them real. I mean, here in Rich Earth Institute, you have started by this aspect, I think, with urine collections. Of course, it's not something that it's something that you know already very well, but it's something that seems for me, for us, very important. So maybe I can quote some of the demonstrations that we made. We did a lot of urine spreading on fields in the Saclay region with the OCAPI project. Our colleagues from the agricultural institution, at the end of the project, they said, okay, we finished our study. Now let's go back to our office. And I said, come on, we have fertilized the wheat with the urine. We are not going to just leave it like this. So we took it, and then we went further. We milled it, and then we made bread. And we made demonstration of public eating of this bread that is made with wheat that's been fertilized with human urine. And we are doing this quite often now. And my colleague Florent Brun is also working with the city of Lyon of this question of demonstration. And his main research question is, what is the kind of demonstration that we need, especially in the agricultural sector, to have people go forward with the use of human urine in agriculture. And of course, I need to quote the Enville project in OCAPI program. It's kind of a baby Rich Earth Institute project. So we are very grateful of what you did. Louise Raguet is conducting it, and we are very happy to have now, I think it's 10 people today, our small-scale community program of urine diversion in Paris, and Louise Raguet has made it possible now, and it's working, I mean, from the beginning to the end. With the farmer, and our hope is that we will manage to have other community scale programs emerging in the next years, and we've just received a funding for going forward and disseminating that kind of community scale programs at the larger scale in France. So we hope that in the next years we'll have many more community scale urine diversion program, and with a gratefulness of everybody for the Rich Earth Institute. Who launched this, and then also make these transformation tangible. We, for example, deploy workshops from toilets to field. So we make people from a territory work together, and it's in French again, but it's possible to translate it. It's a game where people have cards and they can imagine whatever they like in terms of human urine and human excreta, human feces management. And we have cards to play about how the toilets could be, what the storage could be, what is the transformation could be, how could it be valorized, and people just choose the options and work together on a territory to see what are the best options. So we have done this a couple of times already, and lately in Lyon, to think about the new human excreta management possible in this city. And we also try to touch sensitivity, because I believe that this question of resisting to the Anthropocene disaster is also a question of touching not only our mind but also our sensitivity. So we are using music, the eating of the bread, to develop this, and we made a musical event that we do regularly in France about this question of shifting to new paradigms. So coming to the conclusion of my speech, how can we act on our cultural values and power relationships towards sustainable management of human excreta? Well, first, of course, change our relationship to human excreta. We are now in a situation in France. When we do our survey, we have people saying, okay, it's disgusting to poo in sawdust, but we also have more and more people saying it's disgusting to poo in drinkable water. So I think that we are at that moment when cultural values are can possibly shift, and we need to demonstrate a source separation at all possible scales, from the small scale to the much higher scale, to make it progress and possible. There's also, I think, a big question of a north-south relationship. What we've seen in the last decades is the copy-paste of northern sanitation in southern countries in many places, whereas I think that there are many much better solutions that have been deployed in the south and that should maybe be deployed in the north. I'm thinking particularly of container-based sanitation, where I believe there's a much better management of health risks when you contain the possible pathogens, whereas with the sewer, we just disseminate it, and it brings worldwide problems of contamination of the environment. And finally, what are the strategies for change? I mean, usually people think of 3 different strategies. The interstitial is the strategy that you do something small and you hope that it will grow. The reformist is that you hope that you change the laws and that you can just reform the system. And the revolutionary strategy is a strategy of main shift that happens abruptly. I believe the best thing to do is to try and work on 3 at the same time. At least that's what we are doing today. We are, of course, trying to do as much interstitial community scale things that rise. Reform as much as possible, but this socio-technical locking make it very difficult. And for revolutionary things, I mean, the situation we are facing now in Anthropocene is already and is going to bring abrupt changes anyway. So the main question is, how do we get prepared so that we already have the possibility to implement the thing that we think are best when the opportunity arises to put them in practice. So, well, I still have another slide of conclusion. So many things to share. combined management of wastewater and human excreta could be a historical parenthesis. But yeah, we'll see this in the next virtual summits in the next decades, if it has been in fact. We are hindered by our cultural values and industrial values in general. We need to more profoundly change if we want to trigger not only a shift in human excreta management, but a true global socio-ecological transition with coherence between food production, excreta management, and in general the way that we live in relationship with our planet. So with human beings on our planet. So thank you very much for your attention, and huge thanks for the Rich Earth Institute for this invitation, for the Rich Earth Summit, and all that you've done until now. And I'm very glad to spend these 3 days with you, and hope everybody has very nice time and discussions about these changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fabien. Yes. So we have a little less than 10 minutes now for some questions. If folks on Zoom have a question that you would like to ask or comment, you're welcome to put that in the chat for Fabien. And if folks in person have a question or something you'd like to ask, I'm inviting folks to come up to the podium so you can ask it where our Zoom followers can, or our Zoom attendees can hear as well. So if you'd like to just come up here to ask that. We can do that now. Thank you. All right, we see Abby here first with a question. If you'd like to just step up and ask on the Zoom.
Sure. So my question is something you mentioned about the misconception about what sewers do and how we imagine that sewers are magical waste management operatives. And I guess my question has 2 parts, and it's probably too big to get into, but the question first is, how do we educate people about this fallacy without having an unintended drive of the masses towards bottled water and thinking they need to drink bottled water in order to be safe from this potential contamination? And then the second is, how do we empower these kind of entrenched wastewater municipal institutions and not treat them like an enemy, but as a partner and a collaborator in bringing about this transformation?
Thank you for the question. Of course, it's a very important question. We'll debate it during these days. Maybe briefly, what I could say is that I think municipalities are key in this question of transformation. What we see today, for example, in France, is we have the projet alimentaire territorial, it's called in French. So it's food local plans that have started to exist in the last years in France. So the municipalities are starting to think of, okay, how are we going to feed the people of our territory, and how can the agriculture around our cities work well with feeding the people? So I believe that this is the kind of opportunity that need to be seized, because if you have local agriculture feeding the city with practices that do not pollute the environment, then you have both water conservation, because the groundwater is preserved, the river water is preserved, and you have a local organization of food management. And in these food plans in France, nearly nobody talks about the return of human excreta. But I think it's a huge opportunity to say, okay, it's not only one way, like it's not only the rural areas going to feed the cities, it's also the city is going to be able to feed the lands with the fertilizers. So I believe we can really have a win-win situation. And it's the way that the municipalities, I think, can go forward, especially in terms of preserving the water quality is something so important for municipalities. And we have here the option of doing it. Of course, we need to go at higher scale in municipalities. If you look at in the 19th century, I'm thinking of the thesis of Dmitrieva Tatiana. She mentioned all the letters that were written from one mayor to the other. And the mayor was writing, I cannot take the water from the river because you pollute it with your sewer. And then the same mayor received a letter from the next mayor saying, okay, why do you send me your sewer? Because I cannot pollute my... So, okay, this is an absurd problem. And it's typically a public problem because it's public resource that is wasted for everybody. So of course the municipality is not enough, and we need watershed also management at a higher level. So we have the chance in France to have these water agencies. I think they are key, and in fact we see that for source separation they are helping developing it. So we need to have enough governance at the watershed level to be able to cope with the externalities that arise with the system we have now. And now the big question is, how can we make this water problem align with the agricultural question, which is a different topic also, and makes it difficult in terms of finance also. So we made a proposal in a study we made recently, which is there is already a political proposition in France of social security, of health, social security being extended to food. So what the political proposal is, okay, we can all just contribute to a social security establishment, and we can then share this money to be able for everybody to have access to food. I mean, in rich countries like France, it's not, I mean, it's completely crazy that so many people don't have access to food or don't have access to quality food. And so one of our ideas was that, okay, that kind of political proposal could be also including the water question, and then in the same financial scheme, you could have both the water and the agricultural sectors, and then the human excreta valorization could take place in that kind of system. So that's a report that was written by Florence Brun. You can find on OCAPI website. For the question of the people, I think there is indeed this question of, especially with micropollutants, that poses a lot of problem. So I feel that we are facing kind of two directions. One of the direction I would say is kind of the Elon Musk direction. It's like extraterrestrial one. It's we are going to have machines that are going to prevent us from being ill and purify everything, and it's going to work. And even on the planet Mars, it's going to work also. And the second one is, okay, we are human beings. Our lives are going to be dependent on the quality of how we live. So we need to maintain this connection as much as possible. And for me, the question of drinking the water of our territory is something that we must absolutely ask for. And we need to be able to drink the water, what is underneath our foot, the water that is in our river. And if we stop having this connection, then I think it's a big cultural problem that is already happening, of course, but it's a big cultural problem because that's the water that's going to be here for the next centuries, and that's what makes it sustainable. And source separation is tackling the problem of human excreta management at source and not after we've created wastewater. And I think the question of pollution is also a question at source. I mean, we need to stop putting on the market molecules that are just not nocive. So again, I mean, it's a question of political decision that we are losing today. I'm thinking, for example, of the REACH directive in Europe. It's a directive about chemicals. And 2 weeks ago, the decision was that we would delay the fact that we forbid certain molecules. So, okay, we've lost. The lobby of industrial production of these molecules is stronger than the population. But it's not because we've lost this battle that we cannot win it afterwards. So I really think in all terms of the way of thinking, coming at source at the problem is where we need to go, and stop focusing on treating the problem afterwards, but really managing at source.
Thank you, Fabien. I think we have time for one question from the Zoom audience, and then we're going to cut to break before our next panel.
Yeah, luckily a lot of your colleagues are sort of answering things that are happening in the chat, which is great and appreciated. And I think you sort of touched on some of the things that are asked as well. But can you talk a little bit more about the educational outreach to the public that you have tried?
In OCAPI program, yeah, and in circulars also.
What is most effective?
I can quote things that we have done. There is a network in France of that's called GREN. It's a group of educators for the environment. So people who educate people for the environment, for the environmental questions, and they are organized in a network called GREN. and they disseminate information about biodiversity, about greenhouse gas, and so on. And in this network, there was nothing about the question of alternative human excreta management. It was just not known about. So one of the things that we did is that we worked with them to create workshops that are designed mostly for young people, for children at school, or also for elder people. And so we designed workshops where the people, we're just mapping, okay, how does it happen today? Where is the urine fecal matter? How does it work? Where does the wastewater go? And trying to map all this and make people realize these possible alternative management. So I'm quite happy of the work we did with this network. And in France, there's a lot of frescoes that are happening. Do you say fresco in English, I believe? So there's the climate change fresco, there's the food fresco, and so it's workshops that take like 2-3 hours, and people have cards showing the different topics and issues of a problem, and then they just discuss and make try to all apprehend together how is the problem, what is the problem, and how can we think of ways of solving it. And today, one of the projects of the association Circulus I mentioned. So in Circulus we have the conference, musical conference I was talking about. We have a podcast on the question of source separation that is going to be coming soon. And the other thing we want to do is a fresco on the question of food and excreta. So it's one of the projects that we have at the moment. And because I think it's the end, I'm going to finish with the last action that we do in terms of dissemination. I have a full basket, but it's at the Richard Institute, so I believe we will do it this afternoon. So I only have one with me now. But of course, I think one of the things that works a lot is just eating the biscuits. So I have them with me. This is nice French biscuits. They are all made from the wheat that was grown from urine fertilized. Urine fertilizing. So I think that's the thing that worked very well, because people just eat it and start to think, okay, what do I eat usually? And is it okay to eat this? So if you want to eat it, you can. I'll be glad to share it with you. This afternoon, I promise I have a huge basket of biscuits, not just this. And we can all eat together, and people online, well, you can ask us, we can ship you some biscuits if you want. We'll be happy.